to have you here with us on what's been a really warm and beautiful day here in London. Anyway, I hope you've had really lovely weather as well in France.
Yes, we've had a lovely, very sunny day here today. Yes, thank you.
So I think today, I think people are just slowly joining us. So welcome everyone. I'll just I think you're probably all people we've met before, but I'll just introduce us in case you are joining us for the first time this evening. So I'm Raki, and I put together the challenges and courses and in fact the retreats as well. And I also look after the blog, but we've been a little bit blog light this month because I've been really focusing on the retreats, and I'm really excited to have Chye here with us, who has the most nourishing practices, I think, and I use the word practice because you combine yoga and qigong, and you've also take a lot of inspiration from different meditation and mindfulness practice as well. So it's I find them very very nourishing and kind of soft but powerful. So that's
thank you. I'm so glad. I think there's a huge amount of space for that sort of soft strength in the world right now.
Absolutely. And so I'll just welcome. So I'm just glancing off to the side here because that's where your names appear. But if people do have questions and you want to include who you are, then that's a way you can set. For some reason, we don't get the names on the screen, so I have to look at my iPad. But I can see Julia, Cindy, Frankie, Lisa, all here. So lots of familiar names, Kathy, so lots of familiar names who've been with us all week, and it's really lovely to see people returning again and really exploring this theme of be here now in all its richness and complexity, because I think as we've moved through this week, we've really understood how, because it can sound very simple and straightforward, but it isn't, and it is, and I think we've really been able to explore that. And I think what's really so it's Susanna who's saying that it was a wonderful practice this morning. It eased her anxiety, and I think so. I should. And Emma saying hi, Sandy saying hi. So lovely to see all of you here again. And so really today, what we're going to do is revisit something that some of you have touched on earlier this week. And I think, in fact, Susanna, earlier this week, you were talking when we had Adam here, you were talking about the Tonglen meditation and that some of the more challenging aspects of that meditation. And so it's great that we're here with Chye and we're able to actually explore this practice in a little more depth. I think because the way we did it earlier was it was a short meditation at the end of Adam's class. So today we have this full hour to really understand a little more about the practice and how it can be practiced in different ways, and also its origins and so on. So Heidi's saying hi as well, so welcome, Heidi. So I was just in fact going to hand over to you, Chye, to actually fill us in a little more with the background to this practice.
Thank you, Raki. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I know it's sort of virtual, and I'm really glad that It was in fact something I saw Adam write about this week, how what is usually a group experience is tailored for an individual benefit, but now we're actually all having our own individual experiences in our own locations, wherever we are, and then trying to come together to create a group experience. So I'm really glad for your virtual presence here. And Tonglen, yes, what a very rich and also powerful and sometimes severe practice. I'm just going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about what that means. Obviously, it's a practice that origins from the Tibetan Buddhism tradition, and it is practiced and taught by Tibetan Buddhist monks, not people wearing yoga pants in Camden Town necessarily. And there are various ways of approaching this practice. Tonglen, to start off with, means receiving and giving. It is the taking in and the sending out. That's what Tonglen actually means. And the practice of it can be done at various levels depending on what it is you want to work with. And it is a practice that is particularly relevant to the theme of this retreat, which is Be Here Now, because it is a practice that doesn't have to have a particular trigger, or it doesn't have to have a set of parameters for it to be done. Now, I think if you sort of looked up Tonglen meditations on the internet, you would get lots of various practices that would potentially use the language of taking in pain and sending out relief, and whether it's the pain of others or the pain of yourself. And that is a common way of practicing this meditation. However, there are various levels of it. You can start with something quite simple, such as at a slightly more distant level, thinking about the state of the environment or the pain felt by certain animals, and empathizing with that, acknowledging that that exists, and then sending out comfort in response to it. So that's something that's a little bit more distant. The aim of the practice is really to bring into the present moment a particular sensation that needs resolution. So it can be a knot of some description, a tightening of some description that can be resolved in a certain way. So it could be the pain, as I was saying earlier, of a general set of circumstances that is somewhat further out there, or it could be the suffering of certain people in your family, anxiety, depression, maybe somebody is grieving, to acknowledge that someone out there has that suffering going on in them, in their lives, and to send out comfort and relief to that suffering. Or it could also be something that's much more personal. It could be something like indigestion, really specific like that. Or it could be about a relationship. It could be perhaps holding in your mind a relationship that is a little bit charged, with a parent or a relative or a colleague or a child, acknowledging that there is a certain charge or a certain difficulty or a certain challenge with that relationship, and then meeting that sensation with comfort. I've only talked about negative things at the moment, but this practice can equally be practiced with positive sensations. It can be a moment when we get the job. It could be a moment when we taste the most exquisite mouthful of food, and that euphoria, that heart-opening moment, that positivity that wells up in us, that can also be shared out. It could be a moment when somebody gives us praise, somebody gives us a compliment, and instead of rejecting it, allowing ourselves to receive that, and then releasing that and relieving that, meeting that with a degree of comfort and ease. So the shortcut languaging, which I have used myself in teaching this meditation, is breathe in the pain, breathe out peace. And that is one very narrow, and looking at it again in the context of today, probably a little bit misleading in terms of languaging. So what I would like us to do in the practice today is to, first of all, establish what level we may want to be practicing with today in terms of what are we taking in. What is that sensation that we're taking in? Is it a difficult one? And it doesn't have to be anything big. As I was saying, it could be a spot of indigestion, a spot of fatigue, sleepiness, boredom, irritation at a child, irritation at a partner, whatever it may be, whatever it might be that's coming up. Or it might be the sense of, gosh, isn't this a wonderful thing to be able to do online while under lockdown? That positivity as well. Or maybe someone you know has just had a child, that that heart opening, the positive and the negative, to be able to say, okay, that's what I'm going to work with today, and acknowledge your emotional, physical, energetic response to that trigger, and meet that trigger with relief. This practice is meant to hone our capacity to get in touch with compassion. So it is a way of practicing our ability to be open-hearted, to be magnanimous, to be compassionate, to be kind. So what we want to meet this sensation with, often the word peace is used. Maybe let's not try and go there tonight. Maybe let's use something like comfort, or ease, or relief, or spaciousness even. So when we acknowledge something that comes up, that something has a certain energy and a certain momentum to it. So if you imagine it comes up like a little tight balloon, what you meet it with allows that to dissolve and dissipate, whether it's expanding or dissolving or disappearing, or going up into the sun. However you want to choose to visualize ease for you. So the first thing that we're going to start with the practice today is to understand what ease and comfort can feel for you individually, how that will be. It's not a specific thing like there's cruelty to animals and therefore what I'm going to respond with is an end to cruelty to animals. It doesn't have to be such an intellectual concept. Before I carry on, if there are questions that are coming up as I talk through this, please feel free to send them forward and we'll address them as we can. But maybe spend a moment now just thinking about what comfort feels like for you, what ease feels like for you. When there is that knot that you can't undo, and the moment you can undo that knot, what does that feel like for you? This is a slightly gauche example, but for me, I remember the first time I understood something, like understood what relief really meant, was like when I was absolutely desperate for the loo and got there just in time.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. We've all been there. And you get to the loo in time, and the relief that comes with that. I know it's a really simplistic, base example, but that's always brought a smile to my face because every human being can understand that. So just take a moment and understand what relief might be for you. It could be like when you walk into a room that's too hot, you open the windows and fresh air comes in. Or you're sitting in the sun and somebody hands you an ice cream cone or a cold bottle of water. It could be soothing a crying child, or that moment when you stop crying yourself. So whatever the sense of comfort, and I think I'm going to use the word comfort in the meditation tonight. So whatever comfort feels like for you, That's what we're going to practice with. And what we're going to practice is our ability to summon this sensation of comfort in daily life. And the thing about the Tonglen practice is it is most useful when you're not sitting on a yoga mat, when you're not sitting on a meditation cushion, when you're not in a yoga studio. It is out there in life. When somebody calls you something that you don't like, and you see that righteous anger rise up in you, and that is the knot, and what are we going to do about that? You know, when you get that really amazing, wonderful good news in a text message, you know, and you want to scream and shout and jump around in the middle of the street, how are you going to bring some comfort and ease into that position, into that moment in time? So, which is why I say it's a really useful practice for this retreat on the theme of here and now, because that's really about meeting what's here and now with a chosen response of bringing comfort to this specific moment, whatever it may be. It could be a positive or a difficult situation, positive, happy or challenging trigger emotionally, energetically, physically. The practice is whatever comes up, how quickly can we, in the palette of, in the range of responses that we have available to us, how quickly can we choose the one that is comfort? So that's the benefit of the practice. That's what we want to cultivate with this practice. For me, that's my interpretation of the teaching and my interpretation of the practice. And I'm not saying that the strict, severe Tibetan Buddhism approach is not what it is. However, there are different levels of this practice. And as I was saying earlier, we can start with something really simple like indigestion, or we can start with something bigger like a broken heart, your broken heart, or someone else's broken heart, or the millions of children in Africa who don't have any food. You know, that's when we start to, you know, if we go too far too quickly, that's when we can start to feel a bit overwhelmed. And that's going to be a personal practice to deal with what we can, and not to be forced into choosing to take on something that we may not have the capacity for at any point in time.
So we've got a question, Ju, that you might be seeing on screen from Sarah saying, is there any particular breathing technique to follow with this meditation?
There's not a technique as such. However, the meditation relies on you following the inhale and the exhale. So as we breathe in, we acknowledge the sensation, we acknowledge the trigger, and as we breathe out, we invite comfort. So as I breathe in, I literally breathe in, I receive what the stimulus is, and as I breathe out comfort. So I'm trying to think of what would be a good word instead of pain. Because when I practice on a personal level, if there is something I'm literally working with, if it's tiredness, for example, I will say, I breathe in, I feel this tiredness. As I breathe out, I'm breathing out comfort. Seeing as we've all got our own thing that we're going to be working with in this group session, I'm trying to think of a collective word that we could use to describe.
How about discomfort? Because if we're going to counter it with comfort, maybe just going for the opposite. And you know, within all the gradations of tiredness or pain or really deep suffering, discomfort is always a part of that experience.
Thank you, Rocky. Let's use that word. So as we breathe in, we'll acknowledge and really meet the discomfort. And as we breathe out, what we're bringing into the moment is comfort in whatever shape and form it is for you. So shall we get going, you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So find a comfortable position. And as always, you can do this sitting or you can do this lying down if you like. The important thing is to find a position that is sustainable for your body in the environment that you are in right now, wherever you may be. Just take a moment to get really comfortable and settle into the physicality of the body in this posture you're in. And let the belly soften. Watch your breathing. Before going into the practice, just remind yourself again of that sensation of comfort and how that feels for you. Where it might be in your body, how it might feel in your heart, how it might feel on your face or in your belly. And settle on your choice of discomfort. Choose a thing that brings discomfort at this point in time. Don't think too hard about it. It doesn't have to be anything major. And as you breathe in, acknowledge, meet the discomfort. And as you breathe out, bring comfort to the moment. Inhale, acknowledge the discomfort. As you exhale, let the discomfort dissolve by meeting the moment with comfort. Continue with your breath at your pace. And if you find that the initial object, or if your mind is moving around a little bit and wants to pick different things, let it. Let that movement or agitation in the mind become the discomfort of your choice. Acknowledge that my mind may be a bit agitated right now. And as you breathe out comfort. And gently find your hands and your feet. Observing how the body feels. Just take a moment to come back briefly. I find it's useful to practice Tonglen in short bursts, just to keep the mind active and to keep the body actively bringing in and sending out, so we don't slide into the cushy, comfortable, floaty meditational state that often we get into. Because the main bulk of the practice, the main body of the practice, is the constant taking in and sending out. So we've done 10 minutes working with discomfort and comfort. We're going to do another short 8-10 minutes, but we're going to change it now into something that's positive. So find something that has brought some pleasure to you today, whether it's a lick from a dog or a hug from a child, or a really lovely tasting mouthful of food, or a funny picture that you saw, something that has brought a certain degree of pleasure to you. And that is what we're now going to take in. We're taking in the pleasure, and we're going to send out this. We're going to spread this. We're going to spread the sensation, share it with the exhale. So as we inhale, we allow ourselves to acknowledge that pleasure that we experienced, and on the out breath, we share it. So take a moment to find this little morsel of pleasure that has been in your life today, or maybe right now. And as you breathe in, take it in. Take in this joy, this pleasure, however simple or however deep it might be. And on the out breath, send it out. You can send it out to someone in particular, or to your street, or to the nation, to the world. So breathe in, take in this moment of simple pleasure. Breathing out, share it. Breathe in the pleasure. Breathe out, share it. Continue. Stay with your breath, keeping the spine long. Give yourself permission to really take in the pleasure and send it out. Start to gently come back. Find your hands, find your feet. Adjust your physical position if you need to. Just notice the physical sensations, the muscles on your face, or your shoulders, your arms, where the breath might be in the body right now. Allow yourself to come back into your room, to your surroundings. And as we open this up to questions, I just want to talk a little bit about the duration of this Tonglen practice. What I was taught is to practice it regularly for short spurts, because what we want to cultivate is the ease and the frequency. We want to cultivate ease of accessing this capability to be magnanimous, to be compassionate. And we get to that comfort and ease through frequency in the practice. And when I was starting out with this practice, what I found really difficult was to actually sustain it for a long time. I would take 10 breaths, maybe 15 breaths with it, and then I would have to okay, well, I'm done now. I don't really feel that pain, or I really don't feel that I can sustain sort of continuing to breathe in pain, as it and breathe out peace. So I stopped, and I was revisit it frequently and start with simple things. So those are two things. Revisit this frequently, even if it's for a moment. I often find myself, if I'm walking through a beautiful field, or if I'm driving down the road and there's some beautiful nature around me, I allow myself to take that in, say, gosh, isn't this amazing? And acknowledge that I am privileged to experience this pleasure at this point in time. And I send it out. And sometimes it's as simple as, I wish my parents could experience this too. May they also find ease and beauty around them wherever they are.
So we've got floods of observations and questions coming in. So
Right?
and I think the first two from Cindy and Emma are commenting on the breathing, but well, actually Emma's not just on the breathing. So I think Cindy says that she really observed the difference in her breathing in each version, and that it is harder to breathe when taking in discomfort, and it's more comfortable when taking in joy. And Emma found the taking in discomfort challenging, that the second form was so much more fluent, and she had to bypass using language for the discomfort. Otherwise it was just too much for the length of the breath. So they do link to the breath as well, that I guess tightness and shortness of breath.
This is what I do with things that are really difficult. Instead of physically breathing in and feeling that discomfort come into me, is that for the duration of the in-breath, I imagine the discomfort is sat next to me. It's like, okay, there is this discomfort, and it's here, and this is what I've chosen to work with right now. And for the duration of the in-breath, it's there, like a stranger sitting next to me. It's like for when someone sits too close to you on the train or on the bus. It's just there. And I'm going to keep this person, I'm going to acknowledge that this thing is here for the duration of the in-breath, and then I get to the out-breath. And so instead of really physically thinking about I'm breathing in the pain or the discomfort, I'm acknowledging that it's here. It's not necessarily in me. It's there sitting beside me.
Yeah, I think I just hearing you talk about that, I can imagine that is that's really helpful. I'm going to try that as well, because it is hard. It's a hard thing to breathe in discomfort. So and in fact, Cindy says that sounds like a good suggestion, to be able to to manage the
Yeah.
discomfort.
Well, the thing we have to work with, is we are all managing our own emotional and mental states, whatever it is that we're dealing with in daily life. And we have to remember these traditional practices were devised for people who had dedicated their lives to being in a monastery in Tibet. We are not in a monastery in Tibet. So why would we subject ourselves to using the exact same severe languaging that they would use in that context? So I think adapting it, and that's where, adapting practices for modern life is really, really necessary. And that's one of the ways that I do it, to say, we're just acknowledging that there is difficulty here. It's not in me. I'm not sitting at the top of a mountain in Tibet saying, I'm going to take in the suffering of the world and I'm going to send out a bright, peaceful light with my out breath. I'm nowhere near skilled enough to be practicing that. Pema Chodron might be wonderful, but I'm here. If I have a difficult moment and I want to practice this, because I do feel the benefits of regularly being able to get in touch with the nicer version of me, because this is what it's all about. How can we frequently access our ability to be nice, to be compassionate?
And in fact, I think both Frankie and Lisa say that as they continued to practice, they felt the discomfort eased, and they were able to manage it better. And then so it was the intensity that eased. So the question really from Frankie is that actually part of the practice, that it eases, or should she try and sustain that feeling, that, calling up that sense of discomfort throughout the practice?
I think that will vary depending on what the individual is working with. I find that very often too, that if I'm working with a personal issue that might have a really strong charge at the beginning of the practice, after a few minutes, that charge dissipates. And for me, I interpret that as that's working. So I have acknowledged that this discomfort is in my life, and I'm meeting this discomfort with spaciousness, with ease, with comfort. And after a few minutes, it might feel less charged. And I interpret that as the meditation working.
Yeah, and I think Jida also says that she worked with that, a very physical sense of discomfort, and felt that dissipating and over time. Yes, Frankie says it was a personal thing that she was working with. So I think that reflects what you said, that if it is something very personal, you do feel that sense of ease. And then I guess maybe if you are working with broader global issues, like you mentioned starving children, that maybe that sense of ease doesn't come immediately, because I guess you sense that you're sending out love, but that discomfort is still perhaps present. So
absolutely. And for that, it's in a way sort of us doing our practice as a form of service to the general positive vibe around the planet, and say, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes sending out comfort to starving children. And that sense of discomfort is not going to go away, because it is there. The vibration is still there in the planet. And I'll do my 5 minutes, and that's my bit for the day, and then we move on to something else. From a practical standpoint, personal things, I think we feel the difference much quicker.
And in fact, Julia, just thought I'd note this as well, was sending out your radiant smile.
That's very
across
kind. That's
Milan.
very
So that's I think that you're soothing souls across Milan as well. So
thank you.
yeah, so Susanna says that thank you for explaining Tonglen like this. It's really helpful and makes it less daunting or overwhelming. And because I think that thought that we're going to breathe in and of course we don't want to breathe in pain or discomfort.
Yeah.
We know it's there. We have to acknowledge our own pain, but we don't want to actively do that. But actually, I think the way you suggested it, and also working with the positive, I think is really interesting as well.
Yes, I'm just seeing this comment, this latest comment here about using this as form of alignment with bigger issues
yes,
as a prayer
Emma,
through
yeah.
meditation. Yes, thank you, Emma, for saying that, because I think that is one of the ways Pema Chodron describes the foundational drive for this practice, is that if there is enough capacity in all of human being to want to generate goodwill, to resolve the issues of the suffering of the world, the suffering of the world would be resolved somehow, if there is enough collective goodwill around it. And the way to cultivate our ability to generate this goodwill, this is one of the ways.
So yeah, I think that's really helpful. I'm just going to make sure I haven't missed
Yeah.
anything.
It's very important to remember the various levels which you can approach this practice. At a, okay, I want to do some practice, it's in my discipline today, and I'm going to do 5-10 minutes of something like this because I want to practice getting in touch with compassion in me. And it doesn't have to be anything big. And it certainly does not have to be anything negative or painful or difficult. It can literally be the joy you feel from having a family, the joy you feel from having had a good conversation with your mother, or having had a hug from a child, as I was saying earlier. And to say, okay, this is such a precious thing for me, I'm going to send that out. And may other people also have the capacity or the opportunity to experience this. The taking in and the sending out is what we want to cultivate.
And in fact, really, the way you've explained that, it's a beautiful way of almost magnifying the gratitude we feel for things, that we feel this beautiful sense, and we want to share it. So it almost rather than just saying, yeah, it's great, but it's that generosity as well of heart that it's cultivating.
Because when we have extreme pleasure or extreme pain, our habit is to separate and think that it is ours alone. Extreme pain is so lonely. When you feel pain, you think no one else has this pain, and it is only you experiencing it. Or when you feel joy, I got the job, or she said yes, she's going to marry me, or whatever it might be, that is mine. There is this sudden overwhelming thing of, this is mine. And what this practice cultivates is the reminder that actually we can share this. We're in this together.
And actually, I wanted to bring something else up there, that sometimes when we see something joyous happening to someone else, so that sense of, oh well, how come, you're happy for someone, but then there's occasionally that that it can be mitigated with, but they always get the good things that I don't. So that there is that, and so I can imagine that a practice like this helps us to acknowledge that it's ambivalent. Our feelings are ambivalent and ambiguous, but also to really fully participate in that joy, because sometimes people find that difficult as well. It's not that good things happen all around you and you're always happy for everyone. If you're going through something that's more challenging, to feel that sympathetic joy is also not always easy, is it?
And that, in a way, is a really interesting way of looking at what compassion means, is that reminder of that we are not alone. There is that shared heart connection, which is the compassion. It's a shared heart connection which we as a human race and as living things on this planet have at various levels. And so Absolutely right. I totally agree with what you're saying. Whether it's a positive thing, whether it's happening to you or happening to somebody else, negative happening to you or happening to somebody else, the practice is a way to remind ourselves that there is a connection between all of us, and this is just one of the ways of honing that ability to be aware that we are connected.
Yeah, we've Jules says it's wonderful that you've managed to share such a powerful concept in under an hour. So thanks. And Emma likes the idea of this as a gratitude practice. And Kathy says a really interesting comment that she regularly sends love and blessing to others, both known and unknown. But this adds another dimension by acknowledging our own and others' discomfort, and I think that's really powerful, because discomfort is something we want to run away from, but in fact it's there. We can't actually run away from it, because it is something that we experience, and it really experience in a very powerful way, probably in a bigger way than we may experience joy and pleasantness. So I think it's a really helpful practice to experience something that is not easy to experience.
We can look at a plant that is wilting, and we know instinctively what to do. We know instinctively to give it some water. We see someone walking down the street limping. We don't need to necessarily understand the life story of this person, but we know that there is some degree of suffering in that limp. And it's really as simple as that. We have the natural capacity to connect, except we're often just too busy, or we're often just too overwhelmed, and we don't have enough space to take on anything of anybody else's, let alone our own stuff. So this is one of the ways, through breathing in and breathing out, and just having this, I'm taking in, I'm sending out, I'm taking in, I'm sending out, and can literally be 3 breaths. You see an old woman coming down the street with in her Zimmer frame, in her walker, and she's really down. You know, you may not have the time or the capacity to go over and offer her any kind of help. She may not want it. However, we can stop and for 3 or 5 breaths, acknowledge that's what's happening and send out some comfort.
Yeah, very, very powerful indeed.
The little things make all the big difference. And I love this practice because when you strip it back, it is simple and very straightforward to practice in daily life. And that for me is what yoga really brings to the world today. Practices for daily life.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that example of seeing the woman in the street, it's acknowledging that person's pain for a moment, breathing with it and being with them, and that's being present, isn't it? That's really truly being present. And yes, you may not be able to stop and fix what's wrong with it, and you know, the person may not need to be fixed, but actually acknowledging that there is suffering, and you know, being with it, sending out a breath of comfort is, as you said, it's a practice of the heart.
So I hope we can all try this, and you know, small chunks. Be gentle with yourself as you go into it now. And what I found most useful with this is do it for the things that suddenly come up. For the moment I stub my toe on the flower pot and I'm like, and like, okay, the pain is here, and I'm breathing out comfort. And that's what I'm finding myself doing more easily as I practice it more. It's really like for the little moments, which is why I chose, you know, I thought this was a really wonderful thing to do for the theme of Be Here Now, because this is what we can do right now when we are faced with a really strong sensation. Here is an immediate way of resolving that, or turning that energy into something else. because that's also the fundamental principle of qigong. You know, energy just shifts and changes form from one thing to another. You know, you take what comes at you and then you convert it into something beautiful, and it carries on.
And I think actually what you said about you don't have to take on all the really big things. You can take on something little, and you know, if you stubbed your toe, it hurts. It hurts. It's still pain.
Yeah.
You don't have to think, oh God, that's so. I can't give myself comfort because I can only comfort myself if I've got the, you know, the worst heartbreak and if my leg falls off.
Well, in my case, my case, when I stub my toe on something, is my thing is like, who put the bloody flower pot there? In the you know, we start to turn to blame, and we start to find reasons for that, and the mind just goes berserk when shit like that happens. And with a practice like that, the more it's all about getting it to a degree where, okay, it is reactive. The reaction is, here it is, and I'm breathing out comfort. Here is this thing, and I'm breathing out comfort. And obviously we don't succeed every single time. Let's just be realistic about it. You know, there will be the times we hit a child. There will be times when we hit ourselves even worse with words, with self-judgment. You know, there will be times we fail, but that's what gives even more fodder to keep practicing.
Yeah. And alongside the comfort goes forgiveness as well. We need to forgive ourselves for the, you know, it might have been us that put the flower pot there. With me, it quite frequently is.
Actually, the last time that happened to me 2 days ago, I put the flower pot there myself. I forgot it was there. Well, thank you all so much. I hope that you will take something useful from this. And judging from the comments, I think I really hope you keep up the practice and start small. Start small. And coming back to what you said earlier, Aki, about it doesn't have to be about the bigger things, but I think as we progress with the practice, as we feel we're more adept and fluent with this practice, there might be a moment where we might be invited to take on the suffering of others in a more in a wider sense of the word, and we might feel a little bit more equipped to do that, rather than to feel that, oh God, I can't even start to think about the polar ice caps or whatever it might be right now, or the starving children in Africa. I don't have that right now in me, but obviously we'll build up to that, and it's regular practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to echo the thanks that are coming in. I think this practice really does make a big difference, and thank you for sharing it in such a beautiful, accessible way with us, and yeah, and thank you for your classes too. And just to let everyone know, I'm back again tomorrow at 5. This time with Andrea, and we're going to be delving into some more philosophy as well. So it's been a beautiful, rich week. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks. See you all soon.
Bye-bye. Have a lovely weekend.